What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And today we are going to be going through some of the sentencing hearing for Bryan Kohberger. I really want to focus on what the rules are, what's allowed, what's not, why certain things were allowed to be said in this sentencing hearing that we haven't heard in some others. We're also going to compare and contrast the different ways different family members and victims decided to handle their grief and grieve the way and discuss at the end of the case the way they felt was necessary for their family and how you deal with that as a lawyer and as a judge. We're also going to break down the arguments made by the lawyers for each side, what Bryan Kohberger said, why that may be significant, and what the judge said, which was incredibly significant to me and so telling when the gloves get to come off and a judge gets to say and see exactly how he sees this case. Then at the end of the video, we're going to go through some of the new details from the document dump. We are not going to get into the gruesome details that they described, all of the injuries and things like that. We're just going to get into some of the nuances and facts and things that came out and how they would have been used if this case would have seen a trial and everybody would have watched it publicly go through. We still don't know so many things. And that, I think, is an indication of what would have happened even if there was a trial. They don't need to prove motive. So the fact that there's not a lot of details coming out that would make you understand a connection between them or some kind of motive that makes sense, guess what? Some things just don't make sense, especially some of the most deplorable and incredibly terrible and gut-wrenching and evil acts of our time, which this was, in fact, one of them. So we're going to discuss it all here together. I understand if it's brutal and you got to skip some parts. We are going to skip so many parts and really just it's kind of just a recap and summary of everything that happened yesterday. Make sure you guys put any questions you have in the comments. Let's get to it. So that's one of the longest intros I think I've ever had, and such a wind-up because I know this is a very difficult topic and conversation. And I watched the entire sentencing hearing yesterday. It was absolutely brutal. And it was gut-wrenching. I don't know how you couldn't break if you're a parent and watching that. I don't think you need to be a parent to watch that and to break. And you sit there and just think, where do they get this strength from to be able to come in here and do this and speak about what happened to them, their family, their children? It was truly amazing to see how all of them handled it differently as well. And I'm not going to say one is better than the other. What I'm going to say is I think that you can't understand what it's like to go through something like this. And every parent and person is going to grieve differently. And I think that it's kudos to all of them and how they're grieving and getting the strength to get up every day, put one foot in front of the other. And we get to see in so many different cases, right? In cases that I've handled, victims react differently and handle the case differently. It's like we get to see all different sides of that through just this one case. So that was pretty amazing to see from my perspective yesterday. But before we get to the actual statements, I want to read a couple things because so many people had questions about it. There was a lot going on, on Twitter and things like that. That's not the right view. What's a better view? All right. So I want to read what is a victim impact statement? What is the purpose of a victim impact statement? Okay, because that's a lot of what we were focusing on from yesterday. He was getting life, period, multiple life sentences, no matter what. Death penalty was removed because of the plea agreement. So none of that was really a surprise. It's not like anything the victims or their families said was going to affect the judge's decision, right? But there is still a place and a purpose for victim impact statements. I'm going to look at here from a federal perspective, which is, nationwide, basically what they explain. Then we'll look at some nuances that Idaho puts in, and I'll tell you some things that is generally acceptable in other states and other jurisdictions. And then we'll go ahead and listen to some of them. So what is a victim impact statement? It is important for the court to know the impact this crime has had on its victims. Victim impact statements describe the emotional, physical, and financial impact you and others have suffered as a direct result of the crime. Victim impact statements can be either written or oral statements. Written impact statements are submitted to the U.S. Attorney's Office and then forwarded to the U.S. Probation Office to be included as part of the pre-sentence investigation report. So there's also different timings of when this comes out, but generally speaking, these apply to the purpose of victim impact statements, and everybody's kind of coming at this from a different jurisdiction. That's why I like to start with the federal rules. Then they talk about how the pre-sentence investigation report is put together and the different formats that you can use as far as is it written or oral. It is important to know that written impact statements are usually seen by the defendant and the defense attorney. An oral statement at sentencing allows the judge to hear your voice and its inflections and to put a face to the crime committed. If you would like to speak at sentencing, it is important to contact the U.S. Attorney's Office Victim Witness Coordinator as soon as possible. You also have the option to submit a written statement and give an oral statement. What is the purpose of a victim impact statement? It provides an opportunity to express in your own words that you, your family, and others close to you have experienced as a result of the crime. Many victims also find it helps provide some measure of closure to the ordeal the crime has caused. The victim impact statement assists the judge when he or she decides what sentence the defendant should receive. That's generally true. Here, not so much in Kohberger's case. Although the judge will decide the defendant's sentence based primarily on the pre-sentence report and certain sentencing guidelines, the judge should consider your opinion before making a decision. Finally, it includes a financial loss statement, which is used to verify and assess the financial impact of the crime upon you. This information is used by the judge to determine any money the defendant may have to pay you for expenses you have paid or money you owe because of the crime. When the judge orders the defendant to pay a victim, it is called restitution. If the judge orders the defendant pay your restitution, there's no guarantee the defendant will be able to pay you the entire amount ordered. Okay, so you get kind of the picture, generally speaking, of what the purpose of victim impact statements are. Now we're going to take a look at just some snippets on how Idaho deals with it. This is in capital cases, so there are some differences when it is a capital case, not a capital case, but this gives you the idea and kind of the parameters around what the purpose is, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Because we've also talked about in the Parkland shooter case, and the victim impact statements were there, how they went after attorneys and they said certain things about different people in the courtroom, and it was allowed and objected to, and it got kind of nasty. And we were like, man, there are lines. As brutal as this is, as horrible as we feel for victims, there are lines. Where are the lines? Well, evidence concerning the victim and the impact that the death of the victim has had on the victim's family is relevant and admissible. Such evidence shall be designed to demonstrate the victim's uniqueness as an individual human being and the resultant loss to the community by the victim's death. There was so much of that in this sentencing hearing about the uniqueness, the beauty of the victims, how much the world will miss them, the community will miss them, what was taken from these families, the brutality of the loss that they are feeling that is so real and impossible for any of us to imagine. Kohberger had to sit there and listen to it. What he felt, whether he cared, doesn't matter. From my perspective, what the criminal defendant is thinking sitting over there really doesn't matter. It's about the victims when it comes to these victim impact statements, and this was done beautifully yesterday. So here is a limitation that Idaho puts in certain circumstances. Characterizations and opinions about the crime, the defendant, and the appropriate sentence shall not be permitted as part of the victim impact evidence. So we're going to keep that in mind as we listen to some of these victim impact statements. Did they comment on the crime? Did they comment on the defendant? And did they comment on the sentence? So we all know what the sentence is going to be. But were people going to stand up there and say, he should have got the death penalty? The prosecutors sucked. I can't believe they did this. And we're talking about what happened in court, because some things happened outside of court with other press conferences that was interesting in comparing to this. But this leads me to believe that there were parameters given to these victims about what they could say and what they couldn't say. All right, there's one more little snippet from this, and this is Idaho specific. Oh, where is this? Here it is. All right, victim impact statement. A written statement which is given to the prosecutor by a victim to be filed with the pre-sentence investigation report or to the judge prior to sentencing. The victim impact statement includes an account of the victim's physical injury and economic loss, a report of the impact of the crime on the victim's personal welfare and victim and family relationships, and any request for psychological services for the victim or family affected. Okay? So I thought it was important to go over those rules, not to condemn what was said, but to give guidelines to people that felt, wow, this went too far. I can't believe they said that. They shouldn't have said that. Okay? And I will tell you, most jurisdictions do put limitations on what can be said as far as profanity and threats. Those are also some things that are not allowed. But as with so many other things in a courtroom, it is up to the judicial discretion. It is up to what the court will allow and will not allow. And from my perspective, when we look at how this courtroom was conducted yesterday, outside of maybe one or two lines, I thought everything was completely within the parameters we've discussed. There was a little bit of profanity and there were some things that could have been taken as threats. But Judge Hippler didn't cut him off and the defense did not object. And if I was Judge Hippler and I was sitting on the bench as the judge, I would have done the same thing he did. I would not have cut him off. I would not have stopped him. I would not have instructed them not to say certain things. And I realized that emotion can get the better of you sometimes. And one line, one or two curse words, it was still within the realm of the appropriateness of the court. It wasn't something that went way off the roads. It wasn't something that was totally inappropriate, in my opinion. There were things that, and again, none of this, you're not going to hear any jokes today, okay? None of this is something that I'm going to really laugh at or think that is really a joke or something that I think is funny or something that I think should happen. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I agree with the position that every person that stood up there and said and what they said to Kohberger, right? I would hope to think I would have a certain disposition and say certain things. I am not going to sit up here and say, I agree with everything that was said and I hope everything that everybody said happens. What I am going to say is I don't condemn a single one of them. I can't imagine what they've gone through. I think it took incredible strength and resolve to get up there and say what they said, to say their piece, to get it off their chest. And if the court was going to allow it, if I was one of them, I would say it. I would say what I think was right and what I think I needed to say. That's the way I view this. And that's why we're going to kind of look at some of these statements now that we know the rules and hear what was said. And I also think it's important to remember that a lot was said prior to this, especially by the Goncalves family. So what were they going to come in here and say? Who were they going to condemn? And again, I'm going to keep bringing up Parkland because that I came on here and said was totally inappropriate, the way that they were personally going after defense attorneys. That to me, I think there's no place in sentencing for that. Those defense attorneys have not been convicted of a crime. They are not sitting there in the hot seat, taking the lashing. They're doing their job. People can hate them for it. People will always hate them for it. Some attorneys deserve to be hated and do things that are despicable. I understand that completely. But that's not what happened here. And also, somebody screams out from the crowd something at Brian Kohberger. I think they call him a coward. We're going to go through that. And Hippler says, relax, or something like that. So he was keeping the decorum in the courtroom appropriate. He was watching that. You can tell he is a no-nonsense guy. He was choked up. He wasn't laughing. He didn't think it was funny. He wasn't saying, you're going to go get your prison justice and I love it, even though those comments were made. And guess what? I get it. The one family member that stood up there and, he said, I want to address, this family that we have together. I want to address you guys, not him. And then he turned to Kohberger, and this guy you could see was like crawling out of his skin. And I have which family member it is. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I don't remember his name. I believe he was the stepfather of one of the victims, but he was like, I hope you feel my energy. I wish I could take you in the woods for an hour. And guess what? Maybe you could see that as a threat. And if the judge would not have allowed him to say that, I would have understood it. But that's probably my first instinct. If I'm being honest, that's not the instinct I hope I would end up with. There are some other comments that people make that I hope is where I would end up. In forgiveness, offering Jesus hoping for his redemption, as impossible as it may seem. But man, that would be my first instinct, right? Take Brian Kohberger out there alone and see what happens, right? And I get it. I totally get it. Somebody said it was a uncle. I don't remember. We'll get to it. But I guess what I'm saying is, when you have something like this that all these people went through, I'm not going to sit up here and say they shouldn't feel that way or they shouldn't say that way or shouldn't say that. Now, if objections were made and the court has to make decisions based on the rules, we went through the rules so that we could understand why certain things, maybe why there were some lines and why the judge didn't cut somebody off if they did go into a gray area. Okay. All right. So now let's get over to the sentencing here. And anybody, of course, that wants to watch it in its entirety can. You know where to find it on YouTube. Plenty of people streamed it. It was on all the normal channels, things like that. So Bethany and Dylan, the surviving roommates, was brutal to watch. To me, it was really gripping when they mentioned online people accusing them, making up stories, the fear that they live in. Again, they talked about the beautiful souls that were the other victims. They go off on Kohberger for being evil and empty. But it is really sad to think, and I hope we continue to, on this channel, in this community, wait for details to come out, wait for confirmation. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't accuse people of thinking. And even people that are accused of crimes, even the Brian Kohberger types, we afford them the rights our Constitution affords to criminal defendants. And when they admit it and plead guilty, we see them as what they are, right? And from my perspective in this case, he was seen and spoken to the way he deserved through this sentencing hearing. Maddie Mogen's stepfather talked about, again, how amazing she is, the support that they felt. They supported the plea agreement. I thought that was interesting that a couple of the families did say they support the plea agreement. They won't fall into the bitterness and hatred. They have no words for this evil person sitting over there. Maddie's grandmother and father spoke as well. It was a lot of different sentiments from a lot of different perspectives and points of view, which I really appreciated. And then we're going to listen to a couple of the Goncalves family statements here. Again, it's really important knowing the context and what was said before the trial and to hear what they came and said to Brian Kohberger when they had the opportunity to face him.
Today, we are here to finish what you started. Today, you've lost control. Today, we are here to prove to the world that you picked the wrong families. The wrong state, the wrong police officers, the wrong community. You tried to break our community apart. You tried to plant fear. You tried to divide us. You failed. Instead, your actions have united everyone in their disgust for you. I just learned from these lead investigators, to their shock, they worked in an investigation and actually worked with Pennsylvania police officers and the federal FBI. You united everyone. Everyone was united after you. None of us are divided. We are united in our disgust and our love for these children. Today, you have no name. Because when this all started, we all came together and we said, let's stop even talking about his name and just use initials. So even the media just calls you BK. That's all you are. Looking back when the police officers knocked on my door, told me what happened to my child, told me what happened to Maddie Mae, I don't think he was even out of the driveway before my kids turned around, looked at me and said, what do we do, Dad? I told them, you get to work. You get your ass to work. And we started calling, we started texting, we started emailing. And you know what? Within hours, we had your white car on camera. We knew from the very beginning we had you. Police officers tell us within minutes, they had your DNA, like a calling card. You were that careless, that foolish, that stupid. master degree. You're a joke, complete joke. But we took this disaster and we did what we could. We put everything online. We took our kids, we took our images, we took everything that they did, their videos, their photos, the girls' pranks, Ethan singing. We put it out there, we shared it with the world. And the world united. And all they ended up, when they talked about this case, is they talked about Kaylee Jade, Maddie May, Xana, and Ethan. Everything what these people meant to us, a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, we shared that with our community. Then we shared it with our state. We shared it with the country, and eventually we shared it with the world. The world's watching because of the kids, not because of you. Nobody cares about you. You're not worth the time, the effort to be remembered. In time, you will be nothing but two initials forgotten to the wind. No visitors, nothing more than initials on an otherwise unmarked tombstone. From this moment, we've all started. From this moment, we will forget you. We want to, I'll leave in closing, one last thing. You picked the wrong family, and we're laughing at you on your trip to Penn. I will be today or tomorrow. I'll close with, God bless all the men and women that worked on this case and all the hard work that you guys did. You guys allowed us to breathe and allowed us to get through this. The amount of work that you guys put together and the way that you guys put it together was beautiful. There was hard times to be expected, but thank you all. God bless.
Thank you.
So that was big to me at the end that he said, well, throughout, he said that, you picked the wrong officers, the wrong community, and, we're united, which I thought was interesting. He didn't have to say that, right? He didn't say they disagree with the plea deal. He said, thank you to the men and women working on this case. That includes the prosecutors who we know he disagrees with. So I thought that was really interesting in light of some comments that he made before. And afterwards, his son at a press conference said, Bill Thompson does this too much. He's always pleading these cases out. He doesn't want to take them to trial. All these cases that should have been the death penalty, he gives life or he gives sentences that are too light, which I found interesting that was also happening. But again, didn't do it in court, didn't do it in front of Kohberger. Azam, hey, Peter, I missed 3 live streams this week. I hope it's not too late to say welcome back. So is it possible that BK might get out on parole in the future? My LYK live withdrawal finally ended. Thanks. No, can't say is it possible, right? Will there be a law change where they say life in prison is too harsh? It's cruel and unusual. Nobody can get life in prison, whatever. Anything's possible. It is not probable that he will literally ever, ever, ever get out. Multiple life sentences. Thank you so much for analyzing the sentencing hearing. I love what you do. Thank you so much. These are always brutal. And people get upset, right, with anything that anybody says on it. If I do cover it, if I don't cover it, and you just have to understand, like everything else on my channel, if people ask about it and they really genuinely want to talk about it, that's what I'm doing here. That's my point here. I've gotten so many emails recently that are just, that fuel my drive, right? And not just on Kohberger, but on a bunch of different cases. And I love what we're doing here together. And there is a respectful and way that we can do it, but I also understand if it's too much and people don't want to watch it. I don't take offense to that. I really don't. Michelle, thank you for going over the court rules. Dylan's statement was so visceral and just heartbreaking. What do you make of Ann Taylor's demeanor? So here's what I'll say. So people were asking me about smirks of the defense attorneys, demeanor of the defense attorneys. It's very difficult. I've just tried to sit there with a straight face in sentencing hearing like this as a defense attorney, as a prosecutor, as somebody representing the victim who I'd be sitting in the back, right? I wouldn't be sitting at counsel table. It is so hard. It is so impossible. It's so impossible not to break and cry with your client. Because listen, I understand lawyers are not robots. We're human beings. It is our job. I don't think it would be appropriate if I got into the courtroom and cried every time it was very difficult in a difficult position for my client or their family, right? So we got to keep it together. At a moment like this where it's a crescendo, or at the end of our case when the verdict comes in on a civil case or something like that, we get it, or during a closing argument where it's really all coming together. But generally speaking, it's not like you just break down every time your client does, you're in a position like this. So you really have to be stoic. It is part of the job, and people have different resting faces. So I try to give grace. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I understand it's very difficult. The defense objected to the victim daughter directing statements at Ashley Benefield Black Swan trial. Is it allowed in various states? So again, if you saw even the rules here in Idaho and the federal rules, you're not supposed to direct things directly at the defendant's person or character. You can object to that. It's a judicial discretion. And usually there's not really a remedy if the judge allows too much, right? They could say, oh, the judge considered it and created a harsher penalty because he allowed certain things in that he shouldn't have during the sentencing hearing, but it's not really that convincing. Triple B. Laura, what do you think of the lawyers for BC were thinking or feeling during these? Have you ever seen a defendant's lawyer get emotional during these statements? I have. I don't know what they were thinking. It was an interesting kind of handling of the case from beginning to end by them. I bet they were thinking, I can't wait for this to be over and move on to my next case. That's what I would guess. All right, let's listen to the next.
Goncalves, Kaylee's brother. Actually gonna pass it.
This is now Olivia Goncalves, Kaylee's older sister, or is it older sister? I think older sister. And this was one of the ones that basically everybody was talking about. She went hard at Brian Kohberger. She was very poised and almost professional, if I could say that. I hope that's not disrespectful, but she felt like, I'm here to do this for Kaylee. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it this way. And we'll talk about what she says.
I'd like to start by thanking the court for allowing me the time and opportunity to speak today. My name is Olivia, and I'm the big sister of Kaylee Goncalves, and I was blessed to love Madison Mogen as a sister too. I'm not here today to speak in grief. I'm here to speak in truth. Because the truth is, my sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take. They were not yours to study, to stalk, or to silence. They were two pieces of a whole, the perfect yin and yang. They are everything that you could never be. Loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful. Because the truth about Kaylee and Maddie is they would have been kind to you. If you had approached them in their everyday lives, they would have given you directions, thanked you for the compliment, or awkwardly giggled to make your own words less uncomfortable for you. In a world that rejected you, they would have shown mercy. Because the truth is, I'm angry. Every day I'm angry. I'm left shouting at the inside of my own head everything I wish I could say to you. The truth about me is when I heard the news, I didn't cry. I listened for them. I promised them I would, that I would fight for them, that I would show up no matter what it cost me. I swore I'd never let them feel alone. Because you see, I've always been their heavyweight. I've always been the one to fight the battles they didn't feel ready to fight themselves. All it ever took was a call, and they knew I would handle it for them, no matter the time, no matter the cost.
So I will say about hers, like she did a beautiful job of, if somebody was going to object to this, which I'm thinking about as a lawyer, because she's saying certain things like they were everything you were not, I would say she's just talking about the victims and how amazing they were and what they meant. And, juxtapositioning the defendant versus them is a way that she's able to do that. And I think it clears it by leaps and bounds what's appropriate.
They could wave their white flag because they knew I would never back down, not for them. And not even death could change that. Somewhere along the line, I started to think about what I would say to them if I was given just one last chance. If I could gather enough heartbreak or love or sacrifice or whatever it took to get just one message across, what would I say? Throughout this entire process, I've written my feelings down at every moment, my wishes, my love, my denial, my anger. And as one final act of love, I'd planned to read these thoughts, even jarring and discombobulating and not even making sense. Because for me, that was true love. As bare and as naked as it could be, not laced in pretty words or dressed for the occasion, but written through bleary eyes at 2 a.m. with clenched fists, angry at this reality. My true final act of love was to continue on without them, for them. That dream to read aloud my love to them, to bring meaning through pain, was the latest blow in realizing you don't deserve it. And Kaylee and Maddie don't need it. Kaylee and Maddie have always known my love, and they would never ask me to prove it by further victimizing myself to a defendant who has shown no guilt, no remorse, no apprehension. They would say to me, Why would you give the satisfaction of showing vulnerability now? You promised you would never back down. And for that clarity, I'm thankful. I won't stand here and give you what you want. I won't offer you tears. I won't offer you trembling. Disappointments like you thrive on pain, on fear, and on the illusion of power. And I won't feed your beast. Instead, I will call you what you are: sociopath, psychopath.
So here is where an objection could have been made. And when you talk about the rules, maybe, maybe not, no objection, which good for the defense attorneys. And the judge did not step in. Good for him. I would not have either. I don't think this is crossing a line. I think this is fair game. That's my opinion, and I'm fine if people want to disagree with that. And again, this was not going to affect the sentence. So if you have a situation where maybe the defendant or the victims really go off and it affects the judge and the judge gets more angry and gives a harsher sentence and is considering things that he shouldn't be considering in a sentencing hearing, I get it. That's not the case here.
Murderer. I will ask the questions that reverberate violently in my own head, so loudly.
So I think these are the questions coming up right now. Somebody else did this, so I can't take credit for it. Somebody else sent me and said she asked questions that came from one of his research projects and the questions that he was asking other people that had committed crimes, which was her way of, a lot of this was trying to use what they thought, his personality is against him and make him hurt and make him feel it. A lot of that was, woven into the Goncalves statements.
That I can't think straight most any day. Some of these might be familiar, so sit up straight when I talk to you.
Some of these might be familiar. That's, I think, what she was calling back to. Sit up straight when I talk to you. Again, trying to go at him in a way that would make it hurt.
How was your life right before you murdered my sisters? Did you prepare for the crime before leaving your apartment? Please detail what you were thinking and feeling at this time. Why did you choose my sisters? Before making your move, did you approach my sisters? Detail what you were thinking and feeling. Before leaving their home, is there anything else you did? How does it feel to know the only thing you failed more miserably at than being a murderer is trying to be a rapper? Did you recently start shaving or manually pulling out your eyebrows? Why November 13th? Did you truly think your Amazon purchase was untraceable because you used a gift card? How do you find it enjoyable to stargaze with such a severe case of visual snow? Where is the murder weapon? The clothes you wore that night? What did you bring into the house with you? What was the second weapon you used on Kaylee? What were Kaylee's last words?
So a couple other things there. Thank you, Brittany. Yes, it was Brittany. Somebody said, I'll find it. I think it was John that said it. Doesn't one of the victims mention something about an additional weapon? Anyone else hear that? This was when she said the additional weapon. Steve Goncalves said in other interviews there was more than just the knife. But in all the interviews and the press conferences I heard afterwards with law enforcement and prosecutors, it was just the knife. But then you also hear when they describe some blunt force injuries to Goncalves, you can understand how they think it was something else. We know blunt force could be hands, fists, could be the back of the knife. So there is some conflicting things here, which whenever you hear conflicting reports or whenever you hear things that don't make sense or the dots aren't necessarily connecting or you thought there'd be more evidence about that, but there really isn't, then maybe you start to think, is that something the prosecutors were worried about? And that's maybe why they wanted to take this plea deal to get a guarantee. Because even if there was a 2, 3, 4% chance of an acquittal, that's not worth it. You've got to get him in prison for life. I don't know. But yes, there was some mention of, there were some conflicting things there. I appreciate everybody that's gifting the Lawyer You Know memberships as well. That's awesome. Welcome to all the new members.
Please describe in detail the level of anxiety you must have felt when you heard the Bearcat pull up to your family home on December 30th, 2022. Which do you regret more? Returning to the crime scene 5 hours later, or never, ever going back to Moscow, not even once, after stalking them there for months? If you were really smart, do you think you'd be here right now? What's it like needing this much attention just to feel real? You're terrified of being ordinary, aren't you? Do you feel anything at all? Or are you exactly what you always feared? Nothing. If you're so powerful, then why are you still hiding, defendant? You see, I'm here today as me. But who are you? Let's try to take off your mask and see. You didn't create devastation. You revealed it in yourself. And that darkness you carry, that emptiness, you'll sit with it long after this is over. That is your sentence. And it was written on the wall long before you ever pled guilty. You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought you were so much smarter than everybody else.
I will also say, warning, I should have said this in the beginning, there's some language and things coming in these statements, but you feel it, right? You feel what she is going through. You really do. Gail said, Peter, as a lawyer, have you ever had to read a statement for the victims? Yes, I have. In the Daryl Brooks case, didn't one of the victims state wanting to see Brooks, yes, in jail during their victim statement? Do you remember that at all? Vaguely, I'm not positive, but we're about to hear some of that in some of these statements. Will you please play Kaylee's mom's impact statement as a mom? It was so powerful to me. I think that is one that I already have the clips prepared that I'm going to play, but we can talk about whatever ones you guys want to if you have something specific. Dora, Peter, question, in your opinion, do you think Ann Taylor knew he was guilty from the beginning because she claimed factual innocence many times? I'd have to guess no, that she didn't, but I don't know. It's impossible to know that. It's a complete guess. Your thoughts on the black heart he had colored and brought into the courtroom and had on his desk? I have no thoughts about that. I have no clue. Literally no clue. Are BK's parents able to profit via a book, etc.? Theoretically, yes. Theoretically, in most jurisdictions, yes. I'm not aware of one that would not allow them to. Does the prosecution approve impact statements? So I don't think approve is the right word. They can work with the victims and say, this is inappropriate. You're probably not going to be able to say this. You might run into trouble saying this. But these are the victim statements. The victims do them. So I wouldn't say approve, but usually they are disclosed. And if they're disclosed in written form, the defense can object to them and the judge can make decisions. Peter, as an attorney, what do you say to your client about how to react during victim impact statements? What would Ann Taylor have advised him of before going in? He was not the same as he's been before. So listen, this all depends on the lawyer and the client. I know there are some clients that are not going to listen to me. There are some clients that, especially if they're still maintaining their innocence, that might get angry. There are some clients that will just look down at the table. Basically, my advice is try not to react in any overt way, right? Whatever's natural sometimes can be okay, sometimes cannot be okay, again, depending on the client. But you want them to be stoic. You want them to look and listen to what the victims have to say and just sit there, and that's basically it. You don't want them to lash out. You don't want them to laugh, scream, scoff. You don't want them to do anything like that, especially if the judge is yet to determine the sentence, because you tell them how you react. The judge can take that into consideration, right? Whether you've accepted responsibility, shown remorse, things like that can all affect your sentence. Not so much here in this situation, but my guess is she said, don't react if she gave him advice. BK, so bizarrely stoic. Have you ever experienced this? Yes. Actually, I have seen defendants act very in a stoic manner, but I've also seen them laugh and love it and bask in it. Not my client. I've never had a client do that personally, but I've seen it, and it is disgusting. It is disgusting. So I think this is better than that, but whatever. I'm not going to give him any credit for anything he does ever. So whatever.
Constantly scolding, turning your nose up to grammar mistakes, nitpicking and criticizing others. You wanted so badly to be different, to be special, to be better, to be deep, to be mysterious. You found yourself thinking you were better than everyone else, and you thought you could figure out the human psyche and see through it, all while tweaked out on heroin. Lurking in the shadows made you feel powerful because no one ever paid you any attention in the light. You thought you were exceptional, all because of a grade on a paper. You thought you were elite because your online IQ test from 2010 told you so. All of that effort just to seem important. It's desperate. There is a name for your condition, though. Your inflated ego just didn't allow you to see it. Wanna be. You act like no one could ever understand your mind, but the truth is you're basic. You're a textbook case of insecurity disguised as control. Your patterns are predictable. Your motives are shallow. You are not profound. You're pathetic. You aren't special or deep, not mysterious or exceptional. Don't ever get it twisted again. No one is scared of you today. No one is intimidated by you. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You orchestrated this like you thought you were God. Now look at you, begging a courtroom for scraps. You spent months preparing, and still all it took was my sister in a sheath. You worked so hard to seem dangerous, but real control doesn't have to prove itself. The truth is, the scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your fucking ass. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the claps. Some people didn't like the claps, were upset about them. I get it. I understand it. That was a lot at the end. If it would have been profanity laden throughout, I think we may have seen somebody step in, but that was the end. That was the walk-off moment. And that's just kind of how it is. And we've seen lawyers ask questions like as they walk off, and it's like, well, you probably shouldn't ask that. It's the last question, whatever. Okay, sit down. We've seen it. And that's how she ended it. And she did what she felt was right to Brian Kohberger. And again, we're going to juxtaposition that to some other comments coming. Coming from this as an emotional parent, I love your perspective as a lawyer. How can his lawyer sit there so emotionless? It frustrated me so much. We believe as lawyers, everybody deserves a defense. The Constitution is real. It protects the innocent and the guilty. But once somebody pleads, this is part of the process. And to sit there again is respect for the victims. John asked this question: can the judge force/make a defendant sit there and listen? They can make the defendant be present, but they can't make the defendant, maintain eye contact or listen or respond or necessarily participate. And that's happened where defendants have laid their head down. Some judges will force them to sit up, but really, legally speaking, being present is about as much as a judge can force them to do. So from my perspective, the lawyers are sitting there listening. They've had discussions with Brian Kohberger, have him sitting there listening. From my perspective, this is what the process is, right? They can't take an eye for an eye. Some of them I'm sure would want to, and I can understand that. But this is what the process is. It's not perfect, but this is them with their opportunity to speak to Brian Kohberger.
Thank you.
This is Kaylee's mom.
I never imagined having to speak to someone so devoid of humanity. For a long time, I didn't think I'd find the words low enough to meet you where you are. But now I realize this isn't about you. It's about what you've done to me, and I need you to hear it. When you murdered my daughter, Kaylee J. Goncalves, you didn't just take her life, you shattered others. You attacked what you could never be, and in doing so, you left a trail of devastation far beyond that house. You stole my peace. You've altered my every waking moment, every sleepless night, the way I view the world, people, safety, trust. It's all been changed by your cruelty. I no longer recognize parts of myself. Joy is harder to find. Laughter feels foreign. The world moves forward, but I'm suspended in a place of sorrow and rage. You've taken from me something that can never be restored. The grief sits with me every day, some days quietly, and other days so loud it drowns out everything else. The emotional toll you've inflicted on me is immeasurable. I live with a constant ache, with birthdays that are now memorials, with holidays that feel hollow, with empty chairs that scream louder than words ever could. I am forever changed. But for you, as a person working on a PhD in criminal justice, you really didn't think this one through. You're not that good. In fact, you're not that good at anything. You couldn't secure a job. You couldn't get along with others. You couldn't even get a female to look in your direction. All because you are pathetic. Now you're a joke in this courtroom. I wish I could crown you with a jester hat to complete your orange jumpsuit clown look. A dead killer doesn't kill again. So while I'm disappointed the firing squad won't get to take their shots at you, I'm confident that the men in prison will have their way with you.
Okay, so before we get to, obviously she's going to get to some prison violence, but she did say that that was the one comment, I think, by the Goncalves family that says they wished it would have been the death penalty instead of life in prison. So talking about, and again, I'm a lawyer. That's what I'm going to focus on, is the legal part of this as much as I can. That's the one that, not united necessarily, didn't support this plea agreement, still here making her comments, but that was the one kind of comment to that.
You in more ways than one. You will finally get what you wanted, physical touch, just probably not how you were expecting it. See, you haven't beat the system. You've simply entered a new one where the rules are cruel and the consequences will never end. You are entering a place where no one will care who you are and no one will ever respect you. You will be forgotten, discarded, used, and erased. You will always be remembered as a loser, an absolute failure. And when those prison doors slam shut behind you, I hope that sound echoes in your heart for the rest of your meaningless days. I hope it reminds you of what we all already know. You're nothing. May you continue to live your life in misery. You are officially the property of the state of Idaho, where your fellow inmates are anxiously awaiting your arrival. But it's okay, because they're there to help you. Hell will be waiting. Quick message from our youngest daughter. Aubrey wanted to say, you may have received A's in high school and college, but you're going to be getting big D's in prison.
Thank you.
So again, and that's the comment about the prison violence. And again, you understand where the family's coming from. That's what they want for him. They want him to hurt like they hurt like they hurt his daughter, eye for an eye. And I understand it. Again, I don't think that prison violence is something we should joke about. I don't think the Goncalves family thinks it's something to be joked about. I think they really legitimately want it for Brian Kohberger. It is a problem in a lot of prisons. And that's one of the things that's a problem where innocent people go to prison or, for nonviolent crimes or in prison too long and this happens to them. So again, from my perspective, I understand the feelings and thoughts on both sides. My hope is the Goncalves family got it off their chest, went at him, took their final swing. And like Steve Goncalves said, forget about him forever. Just forget about Brian Kohberger, which feels impossible, but move on, onward and upward. So I get it. And I understand. Do you think Brian Kohberger was well represented with weak evidence? I think he was absolutely well represented. Absolutely. And the weak evidence comment, I'm going to kind of combine with this one. Peter, how do you reconcile an innocent person could still plead guilty to avoid the death penalty? Why take his word now? An innocent person could get convicted, and there's all sorts of possibilities, right? Very, 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 very unlikely that innocent people plead guilty to life. It is possible, but it's unlikely. And the way I say, as a lawyer, I look at the evidence very differently now that he said he did it and has said, I'm pleading guilty because I am guilty because I did do this. And very specifically, each individual count, he said he did it. So looking at the evidence, which we're going to talk about some of it that was released at the end of the video, I reconcile it in is that I don't think he's innocent. That's just my opinion. I think he's absolutely guilty as sin when it comes to these crimes. Sorry if you mentioned this, but the questions she was asking him, weren't those the questions he posted on his questionnaire? He appeared on Reddit. Yes. And somebody, I think Brittany pointed that out to me on X. That's why I brought it up here. Does any money put on Brian Kohberger's books go to the victim's family? Not necessarily. Like he still can buy stuff, commissary, food, things like that. But so not necessarily all the money that goes to him. I heard she consulted with Ann Burgess, the mind hunter, to hit him where it hurts. That would make sense, the way that it was kind of constructed. Why did the judge for Lori and Chad restrict impact statements, claiming it was the law, but the impact statements here weren't restricted at all? So that's what I said off the jump, that judicial discretion is kind of the biggest thing here. Each judge will handle it very differently. And you're saying 2 Idaho judges, I agree with you, handle it completely differently. Okay, we're going to jump now to the Kernodle family and her sister's comments is where we're going to start.
For this time.
She
I went
eventually does, the mic picks her up better. It's a little low to start.
back and forth on this. I realized this moment isn't about you. It's about justice for Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie. It's about honoring the beautiful people they were and still are in God's eyes. On November 13th, 2022, piece of my heart was ripped away. There's no way to ever fully describe the weight of losing my sister, my best friend. No sentence or punishment will ever come close to the justice Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie deserve. Xana was everyone's best friend. She was kind, she was funny. She was a gift to each person she was able to make an impact on. Xana was someone I turned to when I needed direction or advice. Although I am her older sister, I often found myself looking up to her. She had a radiant energy that everyone loved, and she always knew the right way to approach a problem. She knew how precious and special life was, and she truly did live every day to the fullest. Yet her story was cut short by an act of evil. I believe in a God whose justice is not bound by this courtroom. I find peace knowing that judgment ultimately belongs to him. For your sake, I hope one day you feel the full weight of what you did. I hope you take accountability. I hope you truly experience the guilt and you surrender yourself to Jesus Christ, because no punishment on this earth can ever compare to the isolation and pain of eternal separation from God. Xana deserved more. They all did. But I come here to say this. I am strong. I am brave. I'm a fighter, just like Xana. And you don't get to control how I move forward or what I believe. I walk with the comfort of knowing I will see my sister again. Xana didn't get the future she deserved. She won't be the maid of honor at my wedding, the cool aunt to my future children. I'll never hear her laugh or see her light up a room ever again. But I will carry her with me for the rest of my life. I will live in her honor, fight to be the best kind of woman and someone she's proud of, to make sure the world never forgets who she was. Xana's story doesn't end with what was taken from her. It lives through the love she gave, the people she touched, and the legacy our family will protect. Her light still shines, and her voice will echo louder than this pain. You didn't take that from us, and you never will.
Thank you. And again, the juxtaposition and the difference in the way the different victims' families see this and find it, I mean, that was a very different statement, right? Coming from a very different place. That's where I hope I would be if I was in this situation. I can't imagine how she gets there, right? Like it's brutal. It's so sad. We're just going to listen to, I think, one more. But I really wanted to show all the different ways that victims handle these impact statements. Peter, can you explain any thoughts on Kohberger's family? It's got to be brutal for them. It's got to be horrible and brutal. I heard it was horrible for them. I don't think the dad came, but I think his mom and sister came. I mean, just impossible. And some of the victim statements were like, you also ruined your own family, dude. The Kohberger name is forever evil and miserable. You did this to the people that raised you and loved you. Like, I mean, all of that. Fair game. Peter, does the judge get to go off of the evidence he's seen as well? Yeah, I mean, the judge goes off of everything, the totality here to make his comments. We're going to hear what the judge said, and he doesn't hold back on what he thinks about Kohberger or this case. Liz said, as I remember it, he claimed his hands were tied by the law, that it wasn't his discretion. Makes me kind of angry. Victims' families deserve better. Well, again, the way he reads the law, if that's what he says, then fine. But that is judicial discretion. Judicial discretion is, this is the way I read the law. This is the way I think I have to handle it. And that's the way he read it, which I understand it. Okay, next we're going to go to, so by the way, it was Xana's stepdad that I was mentioning before wanted to take Brian Kohberger out in the woods. We're going to listen to a little bit from her aunt here.
On all of our, is this tragedy, this horrible tragedy on all of our, the 4 children, has brought us closer. You united us with your actions. We're united now, and we're stronger than ever. We have family and friends now that we never knew we had. And, you know, this is probably going to bother everybody, but Brian, I'm here today to tell you I have forgiven you because I no longer could live with that hate in my heart. And for me to become a better person, I have forgiven you. And anytime you want to talk and tell me what happened, get my number. I'm here, no judgment, because I do have answers or questions that I want you to answer. And I'm here. I'll be that one that'll listen to you. Okay? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
I mean, how about that? Right? I mean, this stuff it's really gut wrenching. And when I think about all the different ways that these victims decided to come from their statements, if there's anything inside Kohberger, if he has any kind of feeling or thought about this, which he probably doesn't, they hit it from every angle, right? The angry, breaking him down, making him miserable, calling him names, telling him what's coming, giving him grace, offering him forgiveness, saying it's an ear and I will still want to talk to you and I'm here to talk to you. Like the people, the beautiful people in these families, like it's just, man, it was really something to listen through all of them. I understand everybody that didn't want to. I totally get that. What I will also say as kind of the last part of the victim impact statements is Ethan Chapin's family was not here, did not make statements, held a celebration of life, which again, this is showing us every which way a victim's family can deal with tragedy, the way they see it. And I hope that every single one of them gets peace and closure and what they need to try and somehow, you can't ever really move on, but continue forward, right? And that's what we got to see in the entirety of this process with all of these different victims' families. I thought it was so interesting. All of them were different, right? They've come together. They have this miserable, similar connection through this. But I just thought it was really interesting to watch and a lot to be learned from it. Now we're going to jump to the state's argument. He basically scolds the defendant a little bit for the third-party culprit argument. We're going to listen to a couple minutes of Bill Thompson, which, again, I found very interesting. What happened here?
Defense.
I found very interesting his comments here. We're going to break them down, too, from a lawyer's perspective, obviously. Michelle said, did you hear the other inmates say that Brian Kohberger video chatted his mother for hours every day in his cell? Will that be allowed in prison? So he will definitely be allowed to video chat and call and have communication. I don't know what the time restrictions are going to be or if it's going to be video or phone. I'm not able to answer that. I don't know his specific setup.
Following week after we were in court, we were approached by the defense with an inquiry about a possible plea. And I can tell the court this is the first suggestion ever that there was any consideration, because indeed.
So he's going to confirm some things for us. Defense reached out to the prosecution. This was the first discussion ever about a plea. Does that indicate what Ann Taylor knew or didn't? I don't know, but if we're looking for some context clues, maybe.
The defense had maintained from the beginning that Mr. Kohberger, the defendant, was factually innocent. It's clear that the reality of the evidence and the case that had been investigated and prepared and that we were ready to present in court became a reality. Our reaction, among other things, was to reach out to all the families. And in fact, later that week, on Thursday and Friday of that last week of June, we met with representatives by teams, virtual meetings with representatives of all the families. And we talked about the status of the case and the upcoming trial and things that related to the trial. And we also let them know that there had been an inquiry about whether there might be an offer for a plea. And we asked the family members for their thoughts and feelings. And they were candid. And they have been candid since, and we respect that. And we understand, recognize, and acknowledge that there was a difference of opinion among representatives of the different families. We understand that.
And I thought that was cool how he said that. We understand there's a difference of opinions. Everybody doesn't necessarily agree. We respect it. We understand why people had to go out there and talk. And that's him being a big boy as a lawyer, right? We got to understand people are not going to agree with us. People are not going to like us. That's part of the job. That's part of the gig. We get it. So I'm glad he said that. And he just kind of owned it and took it. And he said, it's on me. That's what he says here. I'm glad he said all this.
One of the challenges of this case, one of the unique things about this case is we have multiple victims, each unique unto themselves, their families and friends unique unto themselves, and all of them entitled to their opinions, all of them entitled to their thoughts. Over the following weekend, our prosecution team, very skilled attorneys who were personally as well as professionally deeply invested in this case, met. And we talked, and the decision was reached. Well, to start with, were there to be any sort of plea offer or discussion, there's only one possibility. And that would be for the defendant to plead guilty straight up to all charges. There would be no bargaining about the counts. There would be no bargaining about reduced sentences. And so we made the proposal to the defense that if the defendant was willing to plead guilty up front to all 5 counts as charged and waive appeal of the court's myriad decisions during the past 2.5+ years on all these motions that would have consumed years, if not decades.
And this is him explaining basically to everybody why this was a good deal for them. He's waiving the appeal on all those arguments. All those years it would have been tied up. Some of the victims' families were on board, and they didn't give an inch on the sentence and on pleading guilty to everything, which again, that to me, all of this indicates this is him saying he did it.
Of time in the future. By the end of the weekend, we were notified the defendant was prepared to plead guilty as charged and factually acknowledge his responsibility in court for these horrible crimes. Obviously, those discussions and negotiations were confidential. And as Your Honor noted, I believe it was necessarily so, because if the defendant had decided not to plead guilty, it would have been devastating to our jury pool for there to be public information that there had been even consideration by either party to a plea resolution. And protecting the prospective integrity of a trial after so many years was paramount.
No, I don't think he was framed. I'm saying there are so many people that are like, well, do you really think he did it? How can you really say he did it? And I'm just saying, this is how I'm saying he did it. Like that's how I'm saying he did it. I've been getting the question. I do not think he was framed. I do not think there's more to this. I think Brian Kohberger did this.
So the end of the weekend came. We notified the victims' families of what had occurred. I recognize and acknowledge personally, and I respect the fact that of these fine, suffering people here, not everybody agreed with the decision we make. I accept that. It's my responsibility in the end.
And I'm glad he said that. And he's right. That's the truth.
Recognize that that's the duty of the office that I hold. So now,
all right. So then he says, basically, now is time for the final judgment. He does get choked up as he does kind of the end of his argument. But I'm really glad he said all of that. He confirmed a lot of details. That was all important. Kraft, isn't there speculation that his parents knew what he had done and tried covering for him? Could they still face charges if proof is there? I have heard nothing of the sort. If they had something to do with it, sure, there could be charges. I haven't heard any of that personally. There's so much going on out there and speculation and people saying things. I'm going to try to focus on kind of what we're learning and what we're seeing from the actual documents in the courtroom. So after he's done, then it comes time for the defense. Do they want to present anything? He is going to ask Ms. Taylor, is there anything the defense has to present?
All right, does the defense have evidence to present today? All right,
No evidence, Your Honor.
does defense wish to make argument today?
They are not going to make any argument. They are prepared for the court to enter judgment in this case. That's it. That's the least you can do. They don't want to make any arguments, and they realize, legally speaking, there's nothing they can do. Everybody already knows the sentence he's going to get.
All right, Mr. Kohberger, you have an opportunity to make a statement if you wish to. I take it you are declining.
I respectfully decline.
He says, I respectfully decline. The judge is like, well, it was not a positive response by the judge. I'll say, he's like, well, can't really do anything respectfully now, dude. Like that's what I'm feeling. But that's it. That's all Kohberger said in this entire hearing. That's all the defense said in this entire hearing. And now we get to the judge laying the hammer here.
During the quiet morning hours of November 13, 2022, a faceless coward reached the tranquility of 6 beautiful young people and senselessly slaughtered them.
And I felt like he got choked up multiple times as well.
4 of them. Who committed this unspeakable evil was unknown for several weeks, but due to the killer's incompetence and outstanding police work by numerous local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, the person that slithered through that sliding glass door at 1122 King Road now stands before the world and this court unmasked.
He's a slithering coward, right? I mean, literally name calling from the judge. Name calling from the judge to the defendant tells you everything you need to know about how the judge views Brian Kohberger. If I was the judge, maybe I wouldn't have said coward and things like that, but I would have gone after Brian Kohberger as well to say this was despicable. I would have spoken about the crime and the act and the deplorable nature of the act and why you absolutely deserve all of these life sentences. I would have stuck to that personally, but you can't blame him for really going after him.
This unfathomable and senseless act of evil has caused immeasurable pain and loss. No parent should ever have to bury their child. This is the greatest tragedy that can be inflicted upon a person. Parents who took their children to college in a truck filled with moving boxes had to bring them home in hearses lined with coffins. The loss this killer inflicted was not just the death of these people's children, siblings, grandchildren, as we've heard today. It has ripped a hole in their soul, destroying a special part of their very essence. Any person who is a parent defines themselves foremost as such. It is their existence and purpose of being. And it has been stolen from these parents. None of us have experienced the loss these victims have in the unspeakable way that they have. And therefore, none of us can, nor should we, question the way in which they have handled their loss. Whether that be in private mourning,
I'm glad he said that as well, because I agree. And I'm glad he said that as the judge.
moved as far as possible from this media circus, or in front of a camera demanding retribution with the loudest megaphone.
Kind of like Chapin, Goncalves, right? The two ends of the spectrum from these 4 families. And he's like, we get it, how both of you are handling it.
I've listened intently to the stories and pain that have been shared today, with great awe at the courage and resilience of the surviving family members of those wonderful children. I've listened also to the surviving roommates, both in person and through their friends. And I can't think of how, frankly, courageous they have been despite the hell that they have faced by uncaring people who have come up with all kinds of crazy theories about 2 kids simply being kids. The parents, siblings, and other family members who have spoken today are designated as victims in our legal system. But going forward, I hope that they can shed that label, as it gives too much power to the evil that condemned them to that role. They are and should be known as survivors, fighters, and foremost as witnesses to the tremendous lives of value and unbounded promise of these 4 young people. For those speaking today and those who did not speak, but who carry the same burden, the same loss, now carry forward the memories of these now perpetually young people, these forever children. These survivors carry the responsibility of ensuring that the voices of these children, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, are never forgotten, and the positive impacts that they have had on so many lives are never minimized, and that the love they shared, the light that they shined onto others is forever celebrated. As we sit here today, this case is ending, and we are now certain who committed these unspeakable acts of evil, but we don't know, and what we may never know is why. I share
This was cool to me that he also goes into the why and what does the judge think about the why, the question that he knows none of the victims' families will ever probably get the answer to.
the desire expressed by others to understand the why. But upon reflection, it seems to me, and this is just my own opinion, that by continuing to focus on why, we continue to give Mr. Kohberger relevance. We give him agency and we give him power. The need to know what is inherently not understandable makes us dependent upon the defendant to provide us with a reason, and that gives him the spotlight, the attention, and the power he appears to crave. Yet even if I could force him to speak, which legally I cannot, how could anyone ever be assured that what he speaks is the truth?
I mean, we've literally said those same exact things throughout our live streams, chats together for months. We've been saying all of this, right?
Do we really believe, after all of this, he's capable of speaking the truth or of giving up something of himself to help the very people whose lives he destroyed? Rather, I suspect the so-called reason would be dished out in enticing, self-serving, and aggrandizing untruthful bits, leaving people wanting more information, more insight, and thus enhancing even further the power he seeks to hold. Even if we could get truthful insight, it would not in any way quench one's thirst for actually understanding why in the first instance. Because there is no reason for these crimes that could approach anything resembling rationality. No conceivable reason could make any sense. And in the end, the more we struggle to seek explanation for the unexplainable, the more we try to extract a reason, the more power and control we give to him. In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration. I know there has been concern about him collaborating on books or movies or other media projects, and I truly hope that someone does not stoop to affording him this spotlight that he desires in the name of clicks, royalties, or profits. Well,
That's his comment, his little wink to anybody thinking about writing a book or making a movie about Brian Kohberger. That's the judge talking. He has no control over it, but he's saying, this is what I think about it.
criminal behavioralists should study him away from the spotlight in an attempt to prevent other would-be killers from acting on their worst impulses. There should be no need for that to spill over into the public eye. The great Idaho jurist Edward Lodge was known for trying to find something positive about every person he ever sentenced. And with over a half a century as a trial judge, that was a lot of people. This was often challenging, and I recall in one case he said that the best he could come up with was the defendant had good penmanship. Truth be told, I'm unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger because his grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him. His actions have made him the worst of the worst. Even in pleading guilty, he's giving nothing hinting of remorse or redemption, nothing suggesting even a recognition or understanding, let alone regret for the pain that he has caused. And therefore, I will not attempt to speak about him further, other than to simply sentence him so that he is forever removed from civilized society. Accordingly, based upon his conduct and based upon the record before this court, recognizing the standards that govern this court's sentencing decisions as set forth in State v. Toohill, I hereby sentence Mr. Kohberger as follows.
And he gives him max after max after max after max, multiple life sentences for Brian Kohberger. I didn't even realize we were past the hour mark, but we are. There's still a little bit I want to get to. So if you guys don't mind hanging around for a little overtime, we still have a little bit left to get through some of the new things that came out in the documents. Peter, are you going to go into the documents at all? There were so many of them. Yes, I am going to pick and choose some of the things I just want to comment on and talk about a little bit with them. So hit that like button, everybody, if you haven't, and let's ride on. I read all of the documents released by MPD. It was jarring to see how much they had against him and how many people reported fake tips. They have statements from other inmates in jail with him. Yes, this is a good kind of transition into some of the stuff I want to talk about. We're not going to get into how brutal the injuries were and things like that. There's a ton in the documents if you want to read about that. But from my perspective, I did think that the way the crimes were committed, the injuries that and marks that were on Kohberger after the fact, on his hands, his face, things like that, that when asked about them, he said he got in a car accident, which I think would have been easily disproven, that he was lying about how he got these injuries. And again, we think about how you build the case, how you prove it. We know the selfies that he took afterwards, reports that he went in and asked for a certain type of mask that covered his face, matching up with what was reported that he was seen in that night. So that was good. They had a lot of facts that were lining up and consistency. I thought it was very interesting that they said Papa Roger was not connected to Brian Kohberger, and they did extensive research on that. I also thought it was interesting that they said they didn't know where the weapon or the clothes were, that there was no connection on social media or something that would prove a connection for motive between Kohberger and the victims. There were so many things that there was speculation about. And from my perspective, I'm glad they did that because people will run with things, and you see when there's a gag order, how it can go all sorts of different directions. And this case was definitely like exhibit A for that. They talked about, again, the inmates that one of the commenters mentioned made comments about him being weird, how they did think that he did it, how Kohberger was intelligent, how Kohberger asked them about the crimes that they committed, how they didn't like Kohberger. So there were comments like that. I don't think those would have been used much at trial. Like when I'm looking at this information, how it's coming in, I don't really think that would have been used at trial. I don't know how relevant or reliable it would have been. I don't know how bad you want to put an inmate up there for the defense to pick them apart and make it look like, man, the prosecution's really reaching to try to find somebody to point the finger at Kohberger because they don't have anything. So I'm looking at that evidence as maybe something that would not have really come out in the trial. Other things, and then also the no connection really on social media with the no motive, right? Prosecution doesn't have to prove motive. They're going to hammer that to a jury. We don't have to prove motive. We don't have to prove motive. Motive is not an element of the crime, but jurors like motives. Jurors expect motives. Jurors want motives. And somebody said the L is crooked back here. I noticed that like immediately when I turned on the video. So I will have to fix that after. But no motive also is something that can make it difficult to try. I think they had a lot of evidence. And now that he's, I think they had a lot of evidence now that he has said that he did it, that we can take in a certain context. But I do think there were going to be some arguments the defense could have made throughout this trial. And again, when we get into the data and things like that, the defense had a lot of experts. What would they have said? I don't know. There's so much that, again, I think that we didn't know about how this trial would have gone. And even after some of the revelation of some of these documents and the press conferences, they really weren't able to answer a lot of the questions still. So I think if you look at it that way, then you can see maybe the prosecutors were thinking, maybe there is a chance we lose this. We don't want to take that chance. Let's take the plea deal. I can still kind of understand where that is coming from after looking through additional documentation. Okay, one other thing that I read was his conversation post-arrest with law enforcement. He basically had, it seemed like kind of a long conversation after he was read Miranda, talking about the SWAT team coming to his house, how he was concerned about his parents and his dog. That was really it. Not concerned about what they would find or concerned about himself. They made a lot of small talk about how he didn't like sports and school and criminal justice major and him wanting to be a cop and how important that was. Talking about his background. It really seemed like a lot. And to me, I think that would have been something the prosecutors used to prove his mindset, what he knew, how he wanted this to be a thing, how he wanted to kind of play with the police. And some of the comments he made showed that. They asked, did you know about this case? And he's like, of course, everybody knew about it. How he said he was alerted from some WSU, something with them. And eventually he asked for a lawyer, but definitely talked about this case. And they had information about how he was searching about this case, wanted to know what was going about this case. Did he go back and visit the crime scene? There was evidence of that. I do think they would have tied a lot of that together with the comments that he was making to law enforcement post-arrest. I do think there was definitely stuff in there that would have been used against him. A lot of comments about the attorney sitting next to Kohberger. Again, we talked about this. It could have been her resting face was just like that. If she was smirking or laughing about it, obviously totally inappropriate. I don't know that that's what was happening. Peter, could a judge reject the plea deal if he doesn't agree with it? So we went in depth on this. There are certain reasons a judge can reject a plea deal, not just because he's like, you have to go for the death penalty. He can't do that. We talked about that a lot on our prior 2 Kohberger videos ago. Peter, would you ever want to become a judge one day? Just curious. No. I have no interest. I love what I'm doing here. I'm talking about it on YouTube, and I love being a lawyer. That takes up plenty of my time. I think a judge would also hamstring what I could talk about on YouTube, but I really love this. Why would they let him sit there with a paper with a black heart on it? He's allowed to sit there with papers in front of him. They're allowed to doodle and draw. How are they going to legislate that? Will Michael Easter come back on here to talk about the tech data now? Was interested to hear what he had to say. I do not think that will be the case. I have been talking to him recently about some other stuff, but I don't think that will be the case. Thank you for not shying away from the victim statements of the Goncalves family like most channels have. I get it. I totally understand. And I hope that that's their form of grieving and moving forward. I really do. But I also understand how legally there could have been objections to some of the things some of the victim impact statements said as well. But I personally, I was like, I get it, especially the stepdad that want to take him out into the woods. I get it. What do you think about the criticism that the victim impact statements gave an undue weight to some victims over others? Should victims' worth really be a factor? I don't understand this. I think that the victim impact statements, I don't think they said you can have 5 minutes, you can have 2 minutes. I think everybody did what they felt was necessary and right. I don't know exactly what this is saying. Will you continue to make content about Bryan Kohberger, or will you stop as the judge suggested people do? So here's what else I'll say. Okay. I knew somebody would say something like this. So I appreciate it. On this channel, no judge is going to tell me what I can talk about or can't talk about. No judge is going to tell me what impact what I'm saying is having. Okay. And you all emailing me has enforced that and reinforced that. Thank you so much for talking about this because it helped me learn it and see it a different way. Thank you so much for talking about this because so much good has been done. These victims' families, these impacts, so much. We've learned so much about the process. We've become better jurors. Okay. So I understand what a judge thinks is going to happen. And I don't necessarily disagree with him that making certain books or videos that glorify this or magnify what Bryan Kohberger is doing or has done, I get that. But I think on my channel, the way that I do it, I feel is appropriate. And that's how I have to judge things. I have an inner circle that I trust, that I talk to, that I will bounce things off of, ask their opinions. And tons of people ask questions and want things to talk about on the channel that I choose not to talk about for reasons that I think are right. So I will continue to talk about what I think is right. I will avoid what I think is wrong to talk about. The judge's comments had no bearing on me, if I'm being honest. They really didn't. And that's what I feel like is good about the YouTube space and the podcast space. And if people don't want to listen to it, I feel like Bryan Kohberger would not like a lot of, I don't think there's been any glorification of Bryan Kohberger on this channel. I think so much of it is the legal process, understanding how it works, defendants' rights, victims' rights, what judges and lawyers are thinking. And that's what this is going to continue to be about. So from my perspective, I don't really want to talk about Bryan Kohberger anymore. I feel like this is kind of the end of it. And if something comes up like new evidence or there's an appeal or something happened that's legally noteworthy, then maybe we'll talk about it. Buster said, I mean no disrespect. I just wondered. And I wasn't saying you did, Buster. I don't take any respect from it. I'm glad you asked it because you're not the only people wondering this or asking it. Okay. So you speak for more people than just yourself. So I appreciate the question. But what I will say is I don't just talk about defendants or cases just to talk about them. I talk about them to answer questions and hope that people can learn. And I learn from them a lot too. And by the way, in case anybody hasn't noticed what a lot of this channel is about, we talk about a lot of horrible human beings. We talk about a lot of horrible situations. We talk about a lot of horrible crimes. It is misery. Though I always say people don't ever call me when something good happens. The world I live in, the world of lawyers of wrongful death, serious, significant injury cases where somebody's hurt, somebody's done something horrible, criminal defense, which our firm does a lot of as well. That's the world. This is the real world we live in. I'm not choosing for these things to happen or for these cases to come forward. And from my perspective, when you guys want to learn about something and you have questions about something, that's the content that's going to end up here. Okay. So, and again, that answer probably is not going to be good enough for everybody. And I understand that. And I get it. And everybody's got to make their own decision. That's what's great about YouTube. This is not a channel that you're not stuck on, right? You choose to be here. And you can choose to be here on this case and not another one, or not this case, another one. And I don't take any offense from that. If the public wants access to these documents, how would they go about finding them? I got them from a link. Somebody sent them to me. Sleuthy, I don't know if she's in the chat or watching. She can probably say, she probably posts a lot of it. There are a lot of great content creators that are posting these documents. I am not one of them that does that posts all the documents. I mean, in some cases, marginalized victims like P may not have anyone speak on their behalf. Does that affect the judge's sentence? It can, but most of the judges I talk to, the victim impact statements do matter and they want to hear from the victims, but a lot of the judges think about them more as beneficial to the victims than beneficial to the judges, right? Because they want the victims to be able to say their piece. They might not necessarily change what the judge is going to do. And the judges probably can guess how victims feel about this. Peter, you help us understand. As a parent, this was so emotional for me and you helped me understand. Joanne, I appreciate it so much. And I just sent John an email today that somebody sent me. It's crazy. I never would have thought it would be like this. And that's why I continue to love it and put so much time into it and thought and energy into it. So I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys so much. You're the reason we do this and talk about this. And we will continue to do so as long as you guys are here. So that's all we got. This was a brutal one. Again, I hope this case is over. I'm ready to move on myself. You guys let me know what you're watching as always, what we're going to be looking at next, what questions you have, and we will try to jump into something else. I am ready to move on. Peter tries to find the light in the darkness of night. John, I couldn't have said it better myself. I really appreciate you and everybody in here. Until next time, though, that's all we got, and I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.